This 66-year-old man had just retired from work. And instead of enjoying a nice and quiet pension, he decided to travel. During one of his travels, he stumbled upon this nest with strange-looking eggs. He was mesmerized by their beauty and even held one in his hand. But what he did not realize was that he was being watched. He was in great danger. If this incredible moment hadn't been filmed, no one would have believed them. John Pellegrino, a spry 66-year-old man, always had the soul of an adventurer. Recently retired and with newfound freedom, he knew the time was right to make his childhood dreams come true. He had a burning desire to see the world, to experience all its raw and untamed beauty. John was a man of simple pleasures who loved the unexpected. The ordinary pursuits of retirement did not appeal to him at all. He was not going to spend his golden years golfing or gardening. He yearned for a thrill that a golf course or a flower bed could never provide. His first post-retirement adventure, a journey to the heart of Africa, a continent bursting with untold stories and unexplored wilderness. He intended to dive headfirst into the land's riches, its culture, its people, and its remarkable wildlife. Little did he know, his trip was going to be far more bizarre and intriguing than he could have ever imagined. The roar of the airplane engines echoed in his ears as he stepped onto the tarmac, and a gust of hot, dry air greeted him. He breathed in deeply, taking in the scent of wild grass, a hint of rain in the air, and the underlying earthy scent of Africa. He had arrived. That night, his lodging was a small hut nestled in a local village on the outskirts of the wilderness. It was a quaint and comfortable accommodation, the walls softly echoing with the rhythms of the night outside. The occasional chirp of a distant insect, the gentle rustle of leaves under a nocturnal creature's footfall. It was his first taste of Africa, and it was delightful. Sleep came slowly, filled with anticipation for the journey that lay ahead. Underneath the canopied night sky of Africa, he could hear the sporadic call of the wild, a melody foreign yet strangely comforting to his ears. It made him feel alive, part of something ancient and expansive. With this lullaby of nature, he drifted into sleep. The morning sun, warm and welcoming, was just beginning to stretch its golden tendrils across the African sky when John awoke. Today was the day he was going on a private safari trip, a prospect that made his heart flutter with excitement. Dressed in his gray gear and with a wide smile on his face, he was ready for the day ahead. He met his guide at the edge of the village. Kofi, a tall, strong-looking man with a contagious smile, was a native of the land and had spent his life amidst the wilderness. Kofi knew the land like the back of his hand. The tour guide possessed an uncanny knack for tracking and spotting wildlife. With a hearty handshake and a flash of his bright smile, Kofi welcomed John to his world. They set off in a jeep, leaving behind the village and embarking into the wild expanse of the African savanna. The landscape was a broad canvas of endless skies and rolling grasslands punctuated by acacia trees and distant hills. The land stretched out as far as the eye could see. The anticipation of what was to come was palpable. In the jeep, traveling over the rugged terrain, the first inkling of the adventure that awaited him began to take shape in John's mind. The thrill of the open savanna, the sense of uncharted territory, it was a feeling like no other. As the day rolled on, they spotted herds of wildebeest moving like a dark, undulating river across the plains, a tower of giraffes gracefully browsing from the tree canopies, and a dazzle of zebras, their striped bodies flashing in the sunlight. They even had the fortune of observing a pride of lions lazing in the shade of a large acacia tree. The sheer diversity of wildlife was astounding, and John was swept up in the grandeur of it all. But the biggest adventure was about to descend upon him. A discovery was about to be made that would amaze even Kofi, an experienced tour guide. And that was not all, because this would-be discovery would also put both of them in incredible danger. Kofi spotted the anomaly first. A set of strange tracks that he couldn't quite place, etched into the earth leading towards an open field. A peculiar glint flickered in his eyes. He was usually the epitome of composure, his demeanor cool and his temperament frosty. But these unusual tracks had sparked a keen interest, stirring a visible mix of excitement and anxiety. The jeep was promptly parked, and Kofi hopped out, motioning for John to follow. With a glance of determination and a look that was increasingly losing its calm demeanor, Kofi began to follow the tracks. John, caught up in the contagious sense of adventure, followed Kofi. Their trek led them to the open field, a sprawling canvas of golden grass swaying in the mild breeze. Then, there it was, the epicenter of their unexpected escapade. An oddly crafted pile, a strange amalgamation of twigs, moss, and sand, was laid out before them, forming an almost perfect circle. The peculiar structure appeared benign and unimpressive from a distance, but as they drew closer, the true scale of their find began to materialize. It seemed to be a huge nest with something extraordinary inside. Nestled within the large nest were numerous, strange-looking eggs. Each was of immense size, their odd shapes a stark contrast to the surroundings. Their colors varied, swirling patterns of vibrant hues etched onto the hard shell surfaces. John was spellbound, eyes wide with awe, and Kofi was equally entranced. They slowly approached, taking care not to disturb the beautiful spectacle before them. John noticed Kofi's excitement was overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. Kneeling next to the nest, they were both captivated by the sight. These were not ordinary eggs, their size and the distinctive markings on them made that clear. In this vast, open expanse under the radiant African sun, they found themselves humbled. The adventure they'd sought had morphed into something far more mesmerizing and potentially alarming. The sense of sheer wonder was impossible to contain. Here they were, two men on an African field, beholding something inexplicable. John, for a moment, allowed himself to forget the impending sense of dread, allowing the beauty of the situation to wash over him. Kofi, on the other hand, was a bundle of nerves. His eyes scanned the surroundings, a clear look of concern etched on his face. Whatever creature these eggs belonged to was beyond his knowledge. "John, we should head back to the jeep," Kofi said, his voice barely more than a whisper. There was an urgency to his tone that wasn't there before, an urgency that startled John out of his reverie. John gave the nest a final glance, filled with both fascination and trepidation, and got up. As they began to retreat, a sudden feeling of unease washed over them. Their surroundings felt different, the air grew heavy with an unexplainable tension. John felt it first, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Kofi confirmed his suspicion by scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. Their gaze landed on the tall grass at a distance. It was stirring, shifting, swaying unnaturally, the oscillations growing more violent. Kofi's hand instinctively clutched the handle of his knife, and his other hand waved John backward. There was something in the grass, something big. And it was moving towards them. The disturbing rustle of the grass was then drowned by a low growl that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Their hearts pounded in their chests like war drums. And then, from the tall grass emerged the cause of their fear. A massive creature that stole their breaths away. It was a crocodile, an unnaturally large one, its scales glistening menacingly under the African sun. Its eyes locked onto them, predatory and chilling. The size of the creature was astonishing, a real-life leviathan. Even Kofi, who had seen many great beasts in his time, was taken aback. There was no time for awe, though, they were in danger. The jeep was still a fair distance away, and between them and safety was a monstrous crocodile that looked as though it hadn't eaten in a while. "Back to the jeep." Slowly. "Don't run," Kofi whispered, his eyes not leaving the crocodile. It was crucial they didn't startle the beast into attacking. Their retreat was tense, one agonizing step after another. But then, after they had barely moved, the crocodile decided it had had enough waiting. The monstrous reptile lunged towards them, the ground shaking with each step. "Run!" Kofi yelled, breaking into a sprint. John, propelled by adrenaline, did the same. They ran towards the jeep, the thunderous roars of the crocodile hot on their heels. The world around them blurred as they focused only on their escape. John could feel his heart pounding in his chest as if trying to escape, his breath ragged. He felt an odd combination of raw fear and exhilarating adrenaline surge through him. His mind was clear, his fear was replaced with determination. He wasn't going to be some creature's dinner, he was going to survive this. Kofi, running beside him, echoed the same sentiment in his fiercely determined eyes. The chase was on, and it was a race they couldn't afford to lose. The jeep was agonizingly close now. John reached it first, scrambling for the keys in his pocket, his hands trembling with adrenaline. The crocodile was alarmingly close now, its massive jaws snapping at the air behind them. With a swift movement, he unlocked the jeep, threw open the door, and jumped in. Kofi followed suit, leaping into the passenger seat just as the crocodile lunged at the vehicle, its enormous bulk hitting the side of the jeep. The jeep rocked from the impact, shaking them inside. They could hear the crocodile's enraged roars outside. But they were safe now, inside the vehicle, their breaths ragged and their hearts racing. John wasted no time, slamming the jeep into gear and tearing away from the enraged creature. They left behind a cloud of dust and the sight of the enormous crocodile receding in the distance. They drove away in silence. They were safe. But a glance back revealed the sight of the creature returning to its nest. A sight which reignited concerns. What was that? John breathed out, breaking the silence. His adrenaline was starting to wear off, and in its place was a growing curiosity. Kofi shook his head, a grim look on his face. That was a crocodile, but much larger than any I've seen before, he admitted. His usual calm demeanor had taken a severe hit. The mystery of the enormous eggs and the gigantic crocodile was just unfolding. Kofi, despite the terror they had just escaped from, seemed even more disturbed. His brows furrowed as he looked back at the crocodile nest, 1,000 questions flashing in his eyes. Something is wrong, he murmured, his tone grave. John gave him a puzzled look, prompting him to explain further. Kofi took a deep breath, his gaze still fixed on the retreating image of the monstrous crocodile and its strange nest. Crocodiles are sneaky animals, Kofi began. They usually stay hidden, and they're fiercely protective of their eggs. They find a well-hidden spot, sometimes even bury them, to keep them safe. But this, he gestured towards the nest in the distance, it's out in the open, as if it has nowhere else to hide. The implications of his words hung heavily between them. The next day, as the first light of dawn spilled over the horizon, they drove back to the strange nest. This time they stayed in the jeep, watching from a safe distance. They noted the tracks from the monstrous crocodile that led away from the field and into the forest. What they found in the forest was devastating. Lumberjacks had razed almost half of it, their destructive work in the name of agriculture evident. Entire homes of creatures were destroyed. The sight was heartbreaking, and Kofi's earlier words suddenly made horrifying sense. The crocodile had laid her eggs out in the open because her habitat had been destroyed. It was a mother desperate to protect her offspring, even if it meant exposing them and herself to potential danger. This is an outrage, Kofi exclaimed, anger flashing in his eyes. John shared his sentiments. They were guests in this wild, beautiful continent, and it pained them to see it being destroyed. The exploitation of the forest was a glaring issue they couldn't ignore. There were 2 men against an army of encroachers, but they decided to make a stand. Over the next few days, John and Kofi started devising a plan. They wanted to scare the lumberjacks away, not harm them. It was the animals they wanted to protect. The pair spent long hours discussing and refining their ideas. They knew they needed a plan that would not only ensure the immediate safety of the animals, but also prevent any future attempts to destroy their homes. Their plan was audacious. They were going to need help, so they began by enlisting the locals. Kofi was a respected figure, and he used his influence to gather a group of volunteers. Together, they began to implement their strategy. In the coming weeks, they executed their plan, slipping like shadows into the forest at night, their faces painted with determination. They dismantled machinery, deflated tires, and spread rumors of the giant crocodile guarding her nest in the heart of the destroyed forest. Each day, the lumberjacks found their work interrupted, their equipment sabotaged, and their nerves were shaken by the tall tales circulating among them. The uncertainty of the situation escalated costs and disrupted their operations. Meanwhile, word spread about the enormous crocodile and her peculiar nest, drawing the attention of wildlife conservationists and the media alike. The pressure on the lumbering company grew, and finally, they had no choice but to retreat. Victorious and relieved, the townsfolk, led by John and Kofi, set about restoring what they could of the ravaged land. The colossal nest was carefully relocated to a safer area, shielded from prying eyes. The crocodile, dubbed as guardian of the forest, did not attack them this time as though recognizing their intentions. The forest gradually regained its natural harmony. John's visit to Africa had evolved into a crusade to protect the wild, a testament to his unyielding spirit and love for the untamed. His retirement trip was no longer a leisurely holiday but a life-changing endeavor that saved a forest and its inhabitants. John Pellegrino left Africa with a profound sense of accomplishment. He arrived seeking an adventure and left having made a difference. As he boarded the plane home, he took one last look at the sprawling African savanna, knowing that a part of his heart would forever remain there.